Hey y'all, it's Kristen. Welcome to the Tribe Podcast. Tribe is a resource podcast for entrepreneurs looking to build their entrepreneurial tribe. Over my years of working with business owners, I've realized that it's important to know who you need as a part of your network before you need them. Listen in as I ask my trusted resources the question you've always wanted answers to, but didn't want to pay to get. If you're new to your business or you're established and you're just busy, feel free to borrow my tribe as you build your empire. Y'all, today you are in for a treat. I am going to be chatting with Jaren Collins, owner of JCi Creatives. He owns a creatives business that focuses on building marketing collateral for business owners. Jaren, in real life, is one of my favorite people. So let's get into it. Hi, Jaren Collins. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
So good. Welcome to the show. I'm excited to have you.
I'm excited to be here. Happy to be here.
I'm actually cautiously optimistic because I feel like we always start one place and just end up somewhere else. And so I don't know where this is going. I'm just like strapped in, holding on.
Yeah, man, let's just take it to the abyss.
Let's do that. Okay, so we've got Jaren Collins from JCi Creatives. So before we jump into any craziness, tell us about you and your business.
Absolutely. So my name is Jaren Collins. I own JCi Creatives. JCi Creatives is a creative services company in Dallas, Texas. We specialize in photography, video production, and graphic design. I like to say that we're based in Dallas, Texas, because Dallas is the seat of the business, is home. However, I do serve throughout the world. And so we've had some opportunities to do video production, photography work all over the place and serving a lot of different capacities. Our main bread and butter are corporate events, conferences, quarterly meetings, any type of, large scale event. And then also weddings, because I love love. I love what love means and what it encounters. And so those are our two biggest books of business. And then also have an opportunity to do a lot of branding for a lot of really cool people as far as, graphic design and conceptualizing ideas and things. So I call myself the business creative because I love business. I love everything about business. And I am also creative. And so as a byproduct, I do creatives for business. And so, yeah, that's me in a high level nutshell. If y'all want to get, nitty gritty down to the long walks on the beach, we can do that too.
We might.
Maybe not on this podcast. So.
Oh, okay. That's good. Good to know. So you said around the world, and I was like mentally sitting here fact checking you. And I thought about it and I was like, he really is doing business all over the world.
Yeah, man. This is going to sound really harsh, but I go wherever they have a check. So if they've got a check in Hong Kong, I'll be there. I'm all for it. And so I've had an opportunity personally to shoot in a lot of different places from here to all the way to China. But then I've also had opportunity to send teams places, Toronto and things of that nature. And so, it's been really good to be able to grow out a business that not only touches Dallas, which is an awesome place, but a microcosm of something very great, but then also watch it grow to where like I have an opportunity to travel and go all these places. I was really nervous about that when I quit my job and, dove into this, that I never see another beach again. I was like, I'm never going to be able to go out and do what I did in my full-time job. And that just simply wasn't the case. We got out there and we made it happen.
So that's a really great segue into the whole, how did JCi come to be? So tell us about why you decided to leave your job and why you thought it made sense to start a business.
So you want the long story or you want like the abridged, like cute, happily ever after part of it?
Tell me the long story, because I think on Instagram everybody gets the cute story and they're like, Jaren quit his job and now he's great and I want to be like Jaren. People say this, by the way. I'll never tell you because I don't like your ego getting bigger.
My ego's big. It's okay. But so it's funny you say that. I do think a lot of people get that whole like, oh my God, Jaren quit his job and started a business. This is incredible. And I think, a lot of people who don't know me personally or haven't known me for a long time think that like I started JCi Creatives 2 years ago when I quit my job and went full time here in Dallas. And that's really not the case. They talk about the 10,000 hours to be a master of something. And I definitely can say I put more than 10,000 hours into JCi Creatives. I actually started my business back in 2009 off the books. Not, in case the IRS is looking, started in 2017. But I actually started in 2009 when I was in OU. I was at college. And it really I fell into it. So I knew, this is going to sound cliche, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Entrepreneur kind of runs through my family, through my blood. I knew that I wanted to run a business. So that, growing up, I didn't really know what the business would be, but I knew I would own something. And I remember specifically thinking I was going to go become a lawyer and then open up a law firm, and that was going to be the business because it just made sense. And then I realized later on that I ain't got the capacity for that. So what actually happened was I got into it by a byproduct. I've always been creative. I used to sketch when I was little. I used to make things out of tongue depressors. Like, I've always loved artistic stuff. And so when I was in college, I went to school for engineering, nothing artistic there, not even a little bit. But I wasn't doing great. So I have a politically correct way of saying my grades weren't good. So I'll just tell y'all, my grades weren't great. It was engineering. It was rough. But I couldn't get an internship in engineering because my grades weren't great. And it's a catch-22 because in engineering, like, you have to have this great GPA to get an internship, but then they hire like C students. Everybody graduates engineering with a C. It's really rough. Anywho, that's here nor there. So I wasn't getting the GPA I wanted. I wasn't getting offers for internships. So I had a frat brother at the time who said, hey, you want some work experience? You can come down to the radio station. You can work with me. And I was like, okay, cool. Well, what do you got for me? Like, what can I do? He was like, well, I need somebody who can do graphic design. And I was like, all right, cool. I'd never done graphic design before, never even opened up Photoshop or a laptop, never even touched it, And he was like, yeah, just come on by and, we'll set you up. So I was driving from Norman to Oklahoma City, about 40-minute drive, maybe not even that much. And I would go in, I would work, I would sit under their graphic designer, and I literally would learn everything I could. And they taught me how to do graphic design. They taught me how to do some web development, some of the coding stuff that I was doing and that I still do now, I learned there. And so I really learned kind of the initial starts of a craft. And then from there, I took it back to OU and I started doing design there. And I was still terrible, fairly terrible. And a friend of mine, Laura McMillan, kind of, she said she taught me everything I know, but it was kind of like a little brother thing. Like, I would ask things and be in her ear and she would be like, leave me alone, but she would secretly show me. Because like, low-key, I was like trying to be her competition, and she was like, but you need to relax, because she had the market cornered. So what happened was, in doing graphic design, and I find that a lot of people who start in graphic design transition this way, in doing graphic design, I noticed, this is back in 2009, that there weren't a lot of Black people in stock images. So when I was putting together, flyers and stuff, it's hard to find us to put us on flyers and advertisements. So that was my biggest gripe, biggest pet peeve. So what I ended up doing was, I took the money I made on campus. I think I had made like $200 doing flyers. And I took that money and I found somebody, and, they made a gift card fall off a truck, and then somehow acquired my first camera, which was a Rebel. I think it was a T2i. And I still recommend people to start at a Rebel today if you're just starting out. That was it. That was the birth of it. I saw a disparity of Black stock images. I said, I'm gonna get this camera so I could take pictures to use in my flyers. But my baby was graphic design. That's what I wanted to do. But then I started taking pictures and I started being like, yo, I love this. I really enjoy photography. And then I started creating, and I actually this really took everything that I was when I was little and then made it the big version, where I could go and think of, here's a dope shoot I want to do, and this is what I want to look. And I remember back then, we were shooting in the back of tow truck yards, and we were breaking on the construction properties. At least, we won't say we were breaking in because they might be listening. But I was really out there just doing the things that I enjoyed, and it just evolves over the years up until a point where, people don't know, but this is actually my second time being full-time. This is a lot more successful than the first. When I graduated college, I had kind of the same issue with the internship. I couldn't get a job. Or I take that back. I could get a job, but the jobs I got, I didn't feel like were worth my time and worth what I wanted to be doing. So I was like, nah, instead of doing that, I'll go into business for myself. I started the business at the Economic Development Center in Norman, just down the street from OU. But I was in a whole different mindset. I was 23 years old, starting a business. Some of the things that I do now, I did then. So, an idea of building community, I was going to B&I meetings even back then and doing different stuff there. But honestly, I was 23, so I was also going to the bar at the end of every night. I was out till 2 a.m. And then the next morning I wake up at 11 and I'd be at work from 11 to 11 and I go back to the bar. So it was like I burned myself out. I didn't have the tools for success. So then I started building on itself, putting pathways back in line. Like in my mind, I was like, something's got to change. We got to do something different. And so I started planning then for where I am now. Not on some, like, I sat down and wrote out goals. I got a vision board plan, but like I knew here are some steps I need to take if I want to do this seriously for the rest of my life. And I started putting those things in place over the span of, it probably took me 4 years. So people think I jumped ship and was just like, I'm out here. Like, I'm taking this huge leap of faith. But the reality was, when I quit my job, that was probably 4 years in the making, 2.5 of which was saving up the money to make sure that I was ready, But, it was me putting myself in position along the way to be successful.
Yeah, that's actually a really great story. I talk to people all the time, of course, in varying levels from entrepreneur all the way through, multi-million-dollar companies. And the people, a lot of times looking back, like I've been in my business for 6 years and I forget like how hard it was in the beginning. I mean, it's hard now, but sometimes I forget, like I look at what I have now and I'm like, why isn't this better? And then I look where I came from and I'm like, but man, that it was really bad back then. That was hard.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's funny you say that because sometimes I have to remind myself that I'm not brand new. So like I talk to a lot of my peers. So, they say like after the first 5 years, most businesses fail, blah, blah, blah. Like they have all the statistics. And so I've always questioned that because I'm like, I don't feel like I struggle as much as I should. But then I forget that underneath my 2 years of being in full-time business in Dallas, there's 8 more years of me, clientele, building rapport. So it's like I really did build a foundation before I just got out here and was like, we out here. So,
right.
Yeah, and it should be different. It shouldn't be as hard. It shouldn't be, because I'm not starting from scratch. I'm not, like most folks who are doing it. Like I actually had skin in the game long before we came to this point. So,
yeah. So what would you say was the biggest difference between like your first attempt at being self-employed and then the second?
Biggest difference? Oh man. Aside from the money, because I had it. So first attempt, I was coming out of college, I was flat broke. The difference was back then in OU, you can get an apartment for $300 a month. Mm-hmm. It was, my apartment was $300, my car payment was $300, and my office space was $100.
Wow.
And that was back then. So my expenses, aside from my student loan payment, which I was deferring, were $700 a month, all in, not including whatever food. So for me to basically fundraise $1,000 to live a month, that was nothing, at 23 years old. All I had to do was shoot a party every weekend, which I was already doing, and I was good. So, but now I'm an adult. My expenses are a lot different. So, I got a little bit more to think about. Health insurance is a thing.
Right.
So now it's a little bit different in that. But I was able to create that cushion. But honestly, that wasn't the biggest difference for me. The biggest difference was attitude. I laugh at myself sometimes because I really do feel the way my lifestyle is set up now is really no different than when I started it at 23. I still had the same tools. I just didn't know how to use them. So the biggest thing that helped me from then to now was I got a corporate job. And so I remember reading something a long time ago where a guy said he wanted to start a trucking business and he was interested in starting trucking, but he had never done trucking. He wanted to be like the person who runs the company, not the actual trucker. So he said what he did was he went to work as a security guard for a trucking company. Not to work security, I mean, that was the job, but to observe how everything works from a high level. And so he really watched, how are they coming in and out of the yard? What is the expectation? What licensing do they need to have? At the security desk, he's able to see all of that without really being in the business or being disruptive to the business. He was just able to observe. And so my biggest thing was, after I went to grad school, I got a full-time job here in Dallas and I worked for a company for 2.5 years as an employee, just, doing whatever they wanted to do. And while I did not do that to learn business, I did it to make money and to, save and to, support myself. But the biggest thing I got from that was how to run corporate business, how to conduct myself in situations, how to, prospect. I learned prospecting while I was there. I learned, how to manage clients and manage expectations. Managing expectations being a huge part of what business is and entrepreneurship is. So I was able to be there firsthand and get it from somebody who, quite frankly, did it really well. Even though, it was a business that may not align with what I wanted to do long term, they made, hundreds of millions of dollars doing what they do because they were good at what they did. So being able to have that firsthand experience and them teaching me those systems and processes and me still using some of those to this day as a service provider, was a huge help. And so my mentality of how I approached people, how I worked was very different now as it was from 23. And it's very noticeable. And my clients even speak on it. When I very first quit my job, because when I was fresh, I was on everything. I was doing it just like I was doing it in corporate, but for myself. And it was, running like clockwork. So when I very first quit my job, the biggest piece of feedback I was getting from clientele was, wow, you're so professional, you're so responsive, you're so this, that, and the third. Because that's not always the expectation from people in my industry, because creatives can be very creative and all over the place. But they were just like, wow, it's very systematized. This is very, it feels corporate, and it should. And most businesses should. But the reality was that was because that's something that I learned along the way of how to work with people and meet people where they are and create that expectation.
So I know one thing that people are really struggle with is getting up market. So like in your case, you were shooting photos at like parties and on campus events. And now you're doing business with a bunch of major corporations. How did you make that leap?
So I think it was twofold, but I think the bigger overarching thing is knowing your audience. And I think knowing your audience and being able to put yourself in front of the appropriate audience. So, for example, I remember a friend of mine who's a real estate agent. He says, I want to sell, $1 million homes. And he would go out there and he would post pictures of other people's properties that were $1 million homes, assuming he was going to one day meet, people willing to buy $1 million homes. But everybody in his market was in the $100,000 homes. They were not people who would serve to his need. And so what my recommendation would have been, or what should have happened, was that you go meet those people where they are. So for me, in growing my business, a lot of my business grew as my peers grew. So back then I was shooting parties because I was in college and we were in parties. Now I'm an adult and we're in jobs and we're in, we're getting married, we're having children and we're creating lives. And so there's opportunity there, but it also changed because now rather than going to clubs, I'm going to professional groups and professional meetings, and I'm meeting people where they are. And we're having conversations centered around, here are the service offerings. And my offerings are meeting the client's expectation and need of what they're looking for. So if you are, a big company and you say, we need somebody to shoot our end of the year gala, when I send you photos of the gala, you're going to see work where you're like, wow, this is impressive. And this is exactly what we need. So then for me, when we have that conversation, it's a no brainer of, yeah, of course you're capable. That's already in the bag. Then it's, how much, because that's really what it is. You have to meet the people where they are. So if you want to go up market, you need to figure out where your market hangs out. You need to be shaking hands of the people that you're looking to work with. You need to be building that community and stay very present in those spaces, because the reality is people go with, or they work with, who they see. People are very visual, and that's twofold. That's in person and social media. I book more wedding business when I post more wedding work. But if I don't post wedding work, people aren't thinking about it. People are only going to do what you show them, what you tell them, what you reiterate to them. Mm-hmm. So for me, when I wanted to do more corporate work, I implemented an idea of brand responsibly. So now that anytime anybody thinks of branding, brand responsibly comes to mind. They say, oh, Jaren will be the perfect person for this. You don't know how many times I've had people who just reach out to me and say, hey, can you do X, Y, and Z? Not even sure if that's what I do, but they know I do branding and they assume this falls in line. So now it's like, well, let's figure out how we can make this work for each other.
So what would you say to someone who's maybe they've never done, like in your example, they've never done corporate before, but they wanted to get into corporate. They're going to the meetings. Do you find, how did you get your first job? Was it just you met somebody and they gave you a chance, or was it through a network? How did that happen?
I've had it happen a couple of ways. Honestly, it was through a network. So it's always come through a network in some way. So there has to be what we used to call in sales favorable introductions to an extent. This, somebody in that circle can vouch for you and say, hey, I've worked with this person, they're dope. Or, hey, have you met such and such? They're, somebody who's worth working with. Or if they can see it, in that space, then it's going to be like that aha moment of like, oh, you might be somebody who's worthwhile. So for example, I was at a Urban League meeting and I was featured as Business of the Month and a video was played. And this was a video that I produced of myself. I did it because I wanted to basically just have that wow factor. I wanted something that people were like, oh, yo, that's dope. And I'm a creatives company. So what better way than to be creative and create a testimonial video? So I did it. They played it at the meeting. And then at the end of the meeting, somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, I work for, this company. Here's what we're doing. I think you would be the great person to help produce that. The next week I was in their office. So I think that it's a couple of ways. It's showing yourself and proving yourself, but then it's also being in the space to network with certain people and being able to have that validity from other people. I think having that validation is really what helps push you forward into that. So you may work with people who, they're just regular human beings, but you don't realize how much influence or space that they're occupying in some of these spaces that you want to get into. Case in point, I did a thrift store tour probably when I very first went full-time here in Dallas. I didn't make any money from the tour. I think they gave me a love offering, which was great. Awesome people. Didn't think anything of it. I love thrifting, so I was like, I'm definitely down to go. So I get on this bus with all of these women, and we go thrift store to thrift store buying different stuff. Dope. I was like, this is awesome. Move on about my life. Haven't talked to the lady from the thrift store thing. Haven't, thought about it. A couple years later, I get an email, which I actually thought was spam at first, but it wasn't. I get an email from a young lady at Amazon who says, hey, I'm doing X, Y, and Z. I am, putting together our press tour for, some deliverables for Amazon. And so I'm reading through it, and I read through it once or twice. And I'm like, wait, what? Who? What? How? Amazon? How'd y'all find me? Like, who are you? Come to find out, when I go to shoot for the press tour, she was on that thrift store tour on the bus.
Yeah.
So she was present. She didn't even work at Amazon then. But because I made that impression, because I was present and because I was doing the work and visible, she was able to see, oh, he's capable. She knows I do good work. And she said, I'm one of the first people she thought of when they asked her, hey, we need to get a photographer for X, Y, and Z. This was some 2 years later. So I think it's being able to be in a space, make an impression, be validated. And then from there, it's, it's off to the races.
Yeah, I think people really hold on to who you are when they meet you. Like just in general, when you're out networking, I found I'll show up to a networking event and then somebody will walk up to me and it's been years and I can't exactly remember who they are. And they're like, I finally did that thing that you told me to do or save that money or paid this off.
You're like, yeah.
Like, but they really hold on. Like I've been introduced to people like, oh, this is my financial advisor. And I'm like, okay.
I don't hold any of your accounts.
Not even a little bit. But, people meet you and in their mind, they've decided they're going to use you, but they just don't know when. So, yeah, that's a really good point.
We talked about that once about, feeding the pipeline. This is, I guess, off topic. But, I didn't realize kind of what you were saying to me back then when you talked about it. But it's like sometimes you meet people and you might not turn them right now. Mm-hmm. Like there are people I met years ago who are just now coming back saying, hey, I'm working on this new project. I need this and a third. And I'm like, I never would even imagine that this relationship becomes a client thing. Like I just thought, we were just going to talk about it for the rest of our lives. But the reality is, it's you make yourself available. You have to recognize that you're always being evaluated and that whether it's now or later, opportunity's going to be there. It's just a matter of, are you ready when it comes?
Right.
But that's the sermon I could teach on another podcast.
No, I feel like we could have like 3 other episodes from this one. So when you work with somebody like a company like an Amazon, what's the impact that you're making on their business? So asked another way, like if I'm a small business owner and I'm thinking, hey, I want to work with Jaren, but this other guy is cheaper or this other person is like a friend of the family. Like how important is it for you to have high quality work?
It's extremely important. And I think, not even saying that from a bias, oh, I'm high quality work and y'all should pay me, blah, blah, blah. But the reality of the situation is like when you buy into something or someone, any product, whether it be, something at the grocery store, if it's quality and it's high end and it's what you need, it's going to be of value. It might cost you a little bit more, but the reality is you're going to get exactly what you need with no sideshows, I should say. So, for example, I get this question all the time regarding photography. People say, well, I got a homeboy who does this. I had a conversation with a friend of ours last night about a young man who she wants to do some photo booth pictures. And I was like, well, that's all well and good. You can go find somebody who can do it for cheaper, but what's going to be that opportunity cost of you getting somebody cheaper? What happens when they don't have the same level of editing talent? What happens when they don't have the expertise on how to do the lighting? What happens when they give you, an iPhone 5 cell phone picture rather than a high-end quality professional photo? Those are things that you have to take into account of what somebody brings to the table. So in working with somebody, in working with a small business, some people are high just to be high. I agree. But you have to assess the level of quality and then that value to you. Some people say, hey, quality's not that high on my radar. If I can get it for a better price, I'm going to be with that. And that's perfectly okay. You may not be the client for me, but if you're looking for a certain standard of quality, then I think that's when you start to think of, JCi Creatives, of some of the other small businesses out here that would be worth their salt to do that work.
So how do you know when you need to have professional photography or branding done, like for your business? Is there a certain point? Should you come out the gate trying to have professional headshots, or where would you start?
So it's funny you mentioned this. I actually wrote this out in the business plan a couple of years ago, but so personally, I think you should always have professional branding. To some extent, there's some things that you're just going to need. If you're starting a business, you're going to need a logo that looks good, of quality, something that's, to some extent memorable and useful. You may need a business card. That's probably going to be something that you're going to be passing out a lot, especially in the beginning. And then you need quality content and images. So the reality is our society, not even businesses, our general lifestyles are moving towards branded content. People are influencers now. People are starting up Instagram pages and YouTube channels and things over things over things. And the reality is that not everybody's able to shoot that kind of stuff for themselves or to create that kind of content for themselves. And if that is not the case for you, you need to hire somebody, or you need to bring in a husband who can handle that for you and make things, look right. Because everything now is curated. There's not a photo that goes by on Instagram from most people that wasn't thought through in some way. You didn't think of a caption. You didn't think of what the photo's going to look like. You didn't adjust the filter. Very few people are presenting themselves in a light that is not curated, that is not professional, that is not becoming. And so in that aspect, I think it's early and often. You want to start now in building that brand impression, because what happens is if you invest in that brand impression up front, you gain that brand loyalty. You get people bought on board because they say, oh, they're serious. The biggest thing about JCi when I started full time was people had to take me seriously, because I presented a product and presented an opportunity in working with me that was different from anyone going on at that time. You were getting a certain level of professionalism. You were getting a certain turnaround time. You were getting a brand and an aesthetic that wasn't being seen at the time. And so people were very interested in getting involved with that. And that's because early and often I made sure that my brand looked and felt a certain way. And I think that in starting a new business, you have to think the same mentality. Don't come in with the mom and pop, I'm a, grassroots it and build it up over time. No, take your time, assess what's going on with your business, and create a brand image that you can be proud of. Because a lot of times that's going to last you 4, 5, 6 years, rather than just trying to do little things here and there and coming out with a makeshift look and feel for your business, a makeshift identity. Because people notice that, especially nowadays. People are very, very aware of brands. And if it doesn't look up to your standard, they're not going to move forward with you. And the reality is, a lot of times, I think we've all done this. You see certain brands and certain people who are starting these businesses and putting up these makeshift logos and things. And you're like, they don't look the part. And if they don't look the part, you're not going to give them the dollar. So
what I'm really curious about too is you mentioned you get a logo when you're just starting out in the business, you go 4, 5, or 6 years. How do you know when it's time to update or refresh either your branding or your headshot? Because I've seen some stuff on LinkedIn that's glamour shots from 1992. So how often should you do that?
I think anytime you make a major change to your appearance, you should update your headshot. So like if you're going to go blonde, you probably need a new headshot. If you're going to cut all your hair off, it's probably about that time for a new headshot. If you've gained 20 pounds, while you may not want to take a new headshot, probably about that time. Because a lot of times you want to appear the same, in reality as you are online. It's a lot of people that I've met from the internets where in person you're like, who are you and why?
Yeah.
I think that it should be, almost 1-to-1 as best as you can. Now if you're changing your wig every weekend, maybe not. You probably don't need a new headshot for that. But if you're doing some major lifestyle changes, your look and feel of your aesthetic to your brand and your identity is changing, then it's probably about that time to get an update.
Good to know. I feel like I should refer you some people that I know from LinkedIn, but I don't know how to say it nicely. Like, hey, I noticed this headshot is not recent at all.
Oh yeah, man, I can send you something. We can make that happen.
Here's a template of how to make that introduction. Okay.
Right.
We've talked a lot about your business, about going up market, kind of about when people should reach out to you. Tell us any last thoughts or any stories you want to share or anything you'd like to leave us with.
So I actually dreaded this question because I'm not really sure of a story that kind of fits in what we talked about today. So I'm going to tell y'all a little ditty. Like, here you go. Here's another story that I have for you about the time that I hit a house. And you probably are thinking to yourself, what does he mean by hit a house? Like him in his car drove into a house? No, this was me with my body. My body hit a whole home. It was a good day, not unlike today. It was probably November. I was young, probably around 13-ish. And I remember I was in St. Louis at a friend's house and I saw this hill. And this hill looked magnificent. I was like, this is the hill that I need to climb. I need to ride my bike down this hill. I need to have the moment of my life. I saw opportunity in that hill. So I went up to the top of the hill. I got on the bike and then I was off to the races. And so I go down, the wind in my hair, what little hair I have. I was chugging all the way down the hill. And I started to click the brakes so I could slow down because we're coming to the end, and the brakes did not work. And I sat there and I felt the rush of fear in my heart. And I wondered, what is going to be the outcome of this? I'm coming to the end of the hill. I am not slowing down. I don't see a pillow or cushion in sight. What happens next? And as I'm making these decisions, as I'm going through the motions of trying to figure out what happens next, I smack dab right into the garage door of a house. And at that moment, there's a body print of me inside somebody's house. And that was the day that I realized that life comes at you fast.
Yeah, it really does. I thought you were going to say, and this is the story of my entrepreneurial journey.
So I was actually going to circle it back, but you cut me off. Anyway, but the reality is that is entrepreneurship. That is exactly what You rush, you're falling down the hill. Things feel great. You're thinking, wow, I'm picking up speed. I'm gaining momentum. And then you hit a house. And then when you hit that house, you wonder, how the fuck did I get here? Excuse me, I don't think I'm supposed to cuss on this. But you wonder, how did I get here? How did I hit this house? And what do I do now? There's now a house print of me on somebody's garage door. That thing was large. And sometimes you have the idea to tuck your tail and walk away, which I tried to do. And somebody says, no, you need to take ownership of what you did to that house and leave your phone number and let them call your mama and figure out how the insurance is going to cover this. But the reality is sometimes you got to deal with that house. Sometimes you got to hit that house. But after you hit that house, you got to get your butt up off the ground and you got to keep moving forward. And that's how I became the man I am today, working with JCi Creatives.
Look at that. Hey, How to Make an Impression by Jaren Collins. I like it.
Yes.
So someone's sitting, they're listening to this and they're thinking, hey, I really want to get a hold of Jaren because my headshot's out of date. I have a corporate event coming up. I have a friend that's getting married. What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Best way to get in touch with me would be jcicreatives.com. If you're doing any kind of, updating your portfolio, you want to talk branding strategy, you want consultation, you want me to just sit and look what you got going on to help you out with that. You want headshot, photo shoot, graphic design, anything. JCiCreatives.com. That's the first hub. If you're getting married, flourishingweddings.com. That'll be the wedding brand for anybody who's looking to do any wedding photography. If you just want to connect with me online and you just want to, follow and see what I'm up to, JCi Creatives on Instagram and across all other social media, JCi Creatives with an S. or you can friend me on Facebook, Jaren Collins. I'm very friendly. And then we can fight on Fridays. So it's whatever you want.
We did a special segment about Fight Me Friday. I have to go on your Facebook and look at that. Bye.
Yeah, man.
Thanks for hanging out with us, and I appreciate you listening to this episode. I would love to get some great feedback from you. Feel free to leave me a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. Also, any ideas or want to follow up on anything that happened in this episode, I would love to receive your emails. You can email me at kristen@ashtoncharles.co. Otherwise, I hope this episode has helped you be great in your business.